Zoe Johnson pressed the mop against the gleaming marble tiles of the Grand Plaza Hotel lobby, her body aching from the double shift. The chandelier above scattered reflections across the floor, but Zoe's hands trembled as her phone vibrated in her pocket. She froze. Rule number 1. No phones during working hours. Manager Richards had made it clear that for cleaning staff, answering a call was grounds for punishment. But this wasn't just any number. She recognized it instantly, the international code from Amsterdam. Her heart hammered so loudly she was afraid the guests could hear it. 6 times she had applied for the master's program in linguistics. 6 times rejected. This call could decide her entire future. For a moment she hesitated, torn between fear of Richards and the possibility that her dream might finally be within reach. She glanced around. The lobby bustled with executives, receptionists, and businessmen in tailored suits. A billionaire guest had just stepped out of a black car at the entrance. Zoe slipped behind an ornate marble column, her palms sweating. 1 breath, 1 decision. She answered in a whisper, Zoe Johnson. The voice on the other end spoke in flawless Dutch, Professor Van Thon. Her chest tightened, and without hesitation she responded in the same language, her accent impeccable, her words flowing like water. The conversation carried on rapidly details of her application, concerns about her letter of motivation not arriving on time. Mijn motief was te laat ontvangen. Ik had 2 weken geleden verzonden, Zoe explained, her voice low but firm. That was when she felt at the silence. She looked up. A few feet away, Richard Coleman, billionaire CEO of the Grand Plaza chain, stood perfectly still, watching her. His gray eyes sharpened with something between surprise and curiosity. Next to him, Manager Richards glared with open fury. Zoe's stomach dropped. She ended the call hastily. Ik bel je later terug. Johnson, my office now. Richard's voice sliced the air like a blade. The walk to the basement felt like a march toward execution. Zoe could feel the stares of her colleagues, some pitying, others smirking. At 29, she was the only black woman in the cleaning staff with a college degree, something Richards conveniently forgot whenever it suited her. Inside the cramped office, Richards' fury erupted instantly. You know the rules, Johnson. No phones during working hours. And speaking in, what was that? French? Dutch, Zoe corrected before she could stop herself. I don't care if it was Martian. Richards snapped. What I care about is that Mr. Coleman, the billionaire owner of this hotel, saw a cleaning lady ignoring her duties to chat on the phone in the lobby. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? The injustice burned like acid. White receptionists took personal calls in plain sight every day, but Zoe knew what this was. The same pattern, always. I'm assigning you to the convention center bathrooms for the next 3 months. Double shifts, no overtime. Maybe there you can practice your languages without humiliating this hotel. Zoe's throat tightened. The convention center, the worst punishment. Corporate events meant endless hours of scrubbing with no rest. Richards had done it before her way of crushing those who dared to step out of line. You can go now, Richards said coldly, and be thankful you're not fired. That night Zoe sat in her small shared apartment, tears streaming silently. On the peeling wall hung her framed degree in linguistics from Georgetown, alongside international certificates she had collected with sacrifice. 6 years of cleaning rooms while sending out resumes. 6 years of interviews that ended with polite rejections. She thought of her mother's voice. No matter how much they try to make you invisible, Zoe, your worth is not dependent on their recognition. The next morning she returned to the hotel early, determined to face her punishment with dignity. She polished the brass handles until they gleamed, forcing her mind to stay steady. But destiny had other plans. Johnson called Jennifer, the head receptionist, her voice unusually tense. HR wants you. Right away. Zoe blinked. HR. That office was on the top floor, next to the executive suite's uncharted territory for cleaning staff. She entered the elevator, standing stiffly as suited executives spoke about million-dollar mergers, never once noticing her. Inside the HR director's office, she sat on the edge of a leather chair, bracing for termination. "Mr. Coleman has requested a meeting with you," the director said simply. Her pulse thundered. The CEO himself. Richard Coleman's office was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, and modern art adorned the walls. At 45, Coleman was known for rescuing bankrupt hotels and turning them into gold mines. He sat behind his desk, scanning a folder. "Dutch, French, Italian, Mandarin," he said bluntly, not looking up. "Correct?" Zoe blinked. "Yes, sir. How did your resume?" "I requested it from HR after hearing you yesterday. Honors degree in linguistics from Georgetown. Fluent in 6 languages, 2 of them Asian. And yet," he looked up, eyes narrowing, "you've been cleaning my hotel bathrooms for 6 years." Zoe's throat went dry. "Why?" he asked. "Why would someone with your credentials be scrubbing floors instead of handling international relations?" Her voice cracked, but steadied. "I sent 47 resumes to this hotel's international relations department. Not one response. I requested 12 internal transfers, always denied. By Manager Richards and Mr. Whitmore, the Director of Operations." Coleman's jaw tightened as he wrote down the names. "Curious," he murmured. "Whitmore complains constantly about our lack of multilingual staff for Asian conferences. And yet," he tapped the desk with his pen. He didn't tell Zoe that 3 months earlier he had hired a consulting firm to investigate why turnover rates among non-white employees in his hotels were so high. Now, sitting across from Zoe, the missing piece was clear. "I'll be blunt," Coleman said finally. "Tomorrow we host a trade conference with Dutch and Chinese executives. I need someone who speaks both languages fluently, someone who understands cultural nuances. I want you to coordinate our international relations for the event. Temporarily. Salary $5,000 a week, starting today." Zoe nearly dropped her purse. It was more than 3 months of her cleaning wages. "Why me?" She whispered. "Because I heard you speak Dutch like a native. Because you're qualified. And because I suspect something very wrong is happening in my company." An hour later, Zoe stepped into the elevator with a new badge granting full access to executive floors. As the doors closed, Richards appeared. "Johnson," Richards snapped, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing up here without a uniform?" "Working," Zoe said calmly. "International Relations Coordinator. At Mr. Coleman's request." The shock drained Richards' face of color. "Impossible. You don't have the qualifications. Georgetown. Fluent in 6 languages, including Mandarin and Dutch." Zoe's voice was steady. "My resume has been in the files for 6 years, along with 12 ignored transfer requests." Richard stammered, but Zoe walked past without another word. In HR, she met Zoe Williams, a recently hired recruitment analyst. The woman's eyes lit up. "Finally. I saw your file months ago and couldn't believe you were in housekeeping. I tried to ask Whitmore about it, but he shut me down immediately." That afternoon, preparing for the conference, Zoe noticed something alarming. The event's official Mandarin translations were riddled with errors phrases that, in diplomatic settings, could be deeply offensive. She quickly corrected them. "How did you catch that?" Coleman asked, appearing silently in the doorway. "The previous translator doesn't understand cultural nuance," Zoe explained, showing him. "This proposal alone could have ruined negotiations." Coleman's face darkened. "Whitmore swore he hired the best. It cost a fortune." "He didn't check credentials," Zoe said, and she had proof. The following morning, Mary awoke to the muffled sounds of footsteps echoing across the marble hallways of her mansion. At first, she thought it was the staff beginning their day, but as her eyes adjusted to the faint light filtering through the velvet curtains, she realized something was wrong. The sound wasn't rhythmic, orderly, or careful the way her housemaids usually moved. It was heavy, hesitant, and deliberate, as though someone unfamiliar with the house was attempting to navigate it quietly. Mary rose slowly from the edge of her bed, her heart racing in her chest. She had spent years being in control of people, of money, of outcomes. The idea that someone had infiltrated her fortress of wealth sent a chill crawling up her spine. She slipped her feet into the nearest pair of slippers and moved toward the door. She knew she should call security, but a stronger instinct urged her to see for herself. As she cracked the door open, the hallway was empty, bathed in the soft glow of golden sconces. Yet the sound persisted this time from below. She descended the grand staircase, each creak of the mahogany steps feeling louder than thunder ears. Halfway down, she froze. A figure stood in the main hall, back turned, gazing up at the portraits of her ancestors. "Who's there?" Mary demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. The man turned slowly. His face was partially hidden in the shadows, but his presence carried an unsettling familiarity. He wore plain-clothes jeans, a dark jacket, not the attire of a thief, nor of anyone who belonged in her world. "You shouldn't be here," she said firmly, though her voice trembled beneath the weight of the unknown. "I've always been here," he replied, his tone calm, almost mocking. "You just never noticed." Mary's breath caught. The way he said it wasn't just threatening. It was intimate, as though he knew something about her life that no stranger should. Before she could respond, the lights flickered. For an instant, the entire mansion was swallowed by darkness. By the time they blinked back to life, the man had vanished, leaving only the faint echo of the front door shutting. Mary staggered back against the stair railing, her chest rising and falling in rapid bursts. She knew now this wasn't random. Whoever he wasn't after money. He was after her. Later that day, Mary sat in her private office, staring at the stack of financial reports she was supposed to review. Numbers blurred across the pages as her mind replayed the morning's encounter over and over again. She finally pressed the intercom and called for Daniel, her most trusted advisor, the man who had been with her since her first company went public. When he entered, she wasted no time. "Daniel, I want the best security firm available tonight. Reinforce everything. Gates, cameras, bodyguards. No excuses." Daniel frowned. "Did something happen?" Mary hesitated. Revealing weakness was not in her nature. But the memory of that man's words lingered like poison. "Someone was in the house," she admitted quietly. "Not a thief. Someone who knows me." Daniel's brows knitted. "Knows you how?" "I don't know yet," she snapped, more harshly than intended. "But he isn't random, and he won't stop." Daniel nodded gravely. "I'll handle it." But Mary knew deep down that some things couldn't be handled by contracts and guards. Some enemies came from shadows too close to escape. That evening, she attended a gala at the Metropolitan Hotel, surrounded by polished chandeliers and the world's most powerful names. Laughter and music filled the air, yet Mary's eyes scanned the crowd obsessively. She sipped her champagne, but tasted nothing, distracted by the knowing certainty that he could be watching. Halfway through the night, as she excused herself to the balcony for air, she found a single folded note tucked into her clutch bag. Her blood ran cold as she opened it. "The higher the walls you build, the louder the cracks when they fall. You know me, Mary, and soon everyone else will too." Her fingers tightened around the paper until it nearly tore. Whoever this was, he wasn't only inside her mansion. He was inside her world. In the days that followed, Mary's paranoia deepened. Her staff noticed her unease, but knew better than to ask questions. Yet behind her sharp commands and unshakable posture, her nights grew longer, filled with restless pacing and half-finished glasses of wine. One afternoon, as she was reviewing contracts in the boardroom, her phone vibrated. An untraceable number displayed on the screen. She answered, her voice low. "Who is this?" Silence at first. Then the man's voice, smooth, steady, undeniable. "Do you remember, Mary, the faces you stepped on to climb so high?" "I do. I was one of them." Her grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "Justice," he said simply. "And the world watching when you fall." The line went dead. Mary refused to let him see her crumble. She doubled down at work, called endless meetings, signed new ventures, and showed her shareholders nothing but confidence. But the tension between her flawless mask and the crumbling truth beneath it grew unbearable. Every time she walked into her office, she feared he would be waiting. Every time she sat in her chauffeured car, she expected to find him in the rearview mirror. Her worst fear became reality one evening when she returned to her mansion. As the butler opened the door, she entered the dim foyer and stopped dead in her tracks. On the glass table in the center of the room sat a single object, an old photograph. It was her, years ago, in her early 20s, standing in front of a small office building. And beside her, though she had long erased the memory, was him, the man from her mansion. The man from her nightmares. His arm was slung casually around her shoulders, his smile warm, genuine, as though once upon a time they had shared something real. Mary's chest constricted. She whispered his name aloud, one she hadn't spoken in decades. Ethan. And suddenly it all came back. That night, unable to ignore the storm inside her, Mary locked herself in her office and retrieved a leather-bound journal from the safe. She hadn't touched it in years, but she knew it held pieces of the past she had tried to bury. She flipped through its yellowed pages, filled with notes, contracts, and memories of her early empire. There, scribbled between entries of sleepless nights and desperate investments, was Ethan's name. He hadn't been a stranger. He had been her partner, her equal in ambition, her co-founder in dreams. But their story hadn't ended with success. It had ended with betrayal. She closed her eyes, the memories flooding back of how she had cut him out of their company, rewriting contracts, pushing him into obscurity while she claimed the spotlight. She had told herself it was necessary, that he lacked the ruthlessness to survive in their world. But now, decades later, the man she had discarded had returned, and he wanted more than vengeance. He wanted her legacy in ruins. Mary poured herself another drink, staring at her reflection in the glass of the cabinet. For the first time in years, she saw not the untouchable CEO, but a woman standing on a cliff edge, staring down at the abyss of her own past. She whispered, almost to herself, "If he knows everything, if he reveals it all, I'll lose everything I built." And for the first time in a long time, Mary wondered if she deserved it. The silence between them was no longer suffocating, it was strategic. Isabella needed to weigh every word, every glance, because she knew one wrong move could trigger Adrian's wrath. Or worse, his withdrawal into that cold silence that felt even more dangerous than shouting. "You've made yourself comfortable," Adrian finally said, his voice dripping with disdain. He walked over to a velvet chair near the window and sat down with the posture of someone who owned everything in sight. "Almost as if you've forgotten what you did." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream back, to defend herself, to beg him to see that the past wasn't black and white. But she also knew that, for Adrian, pain was power. And right now, he had all of it. "Adrian," she said softly, carefully, "it's been years. You built your empire without me. You're stronger than ever. What is it you truly want now?" He tilted his head, a shadow of a smirk forming. "I want justice. My kind of justice. The words were both a threat and a promise. Isabella's chest tightened with fear, but her mind raced. If Adrian truly wanted justice, she had to understand what that meant in his world, whether it was retribution, humiliation, or something far darker. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Do you know what kept me awake all those nights when everything was crumbling? It wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the silence, your silence. You disappeared as if I didn't matter, as if I was disposable. Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. I didn't disappear to hurt you. I left because I was terrified of what staying would turn me into. For a moment, the fire in his eyes dimmed. Just a flicker, but Isabella caught it. He wasn't made of stone. There was still a wounded man behind the mask of power and cruelty, but the flicker was gone as quickly as it appeared. You chose yourself over me, Adrian snapped. And now, I choose what happens to you. He stood and walked toward her, each step deliberate, echoing against the polished wooden floor. Isabella braced herself, expecting anger, maybe violence. Instead, he stopped just inches away, his hand brushing against the necklace at her throat. You wore this, he said quietly, almost to himself. Even after everything, her fingers instinctively touched the chain. It was the necklace he had given her on the night of his first major victory, reminder of who he used to be before power consumed him. She hadn't realized she was still wearing it, as if some part of her had refused to let go completely. I wore it because it reminded me of who you were, she whispered. Adrian's eyes darkened again, but this time the storm looked conflicted. And who am I now, Isabella? Her answer could determine everything. If she said the ruthless CEO, the man who thrived on domination, he might feel validated. If she mentioned the broken man, he might explode in fury at being perceived as weak. You are both, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. You are the man who built an empire, and the man who still remembers the nights when he had nothing but dreams. You are both. For a long moment, he didn't move. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until finally he stepped back, breaking whatever fragile thread had tied them together in that instant. Enough, he barked. You'll have your chance to prove whether you're worth my time, or whether you're still the liar who abandoned me. He motioned toward the door, and immediately 2 men entered his trusted guards. They stood tall, expressionless, waiting for orders. Take her, Adrian commanded. Her heart pounded. Adrian, wait. But he turned away, his back to her, refusing to acknowledge her plea. The guards pulled her up from the chair, firm but not brutal. She struggled anyway, desperate to make him see her. Adrian, you can't erase the past by chaining me to it. His shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn. The guards dragged her out, her voice echoing down the long corridor until the heavy doors slammed shut behind her. The room they placed her in was colder, less forgiving. No velvet, no warmth. Just a concrete floor, a narrow bed, and a single dim bulb overhead. It wasn't prison, but it felt like one. And perhaps that was the point. Hours passed, at least she thought they did. Time blurred. No food, no water, only silence pressing in from all sides. Isabella lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, forcing herself not to break. Her thoughts circled around Adrian. The way his eyes flickered, the way his voice cracked slightly when he spoke of silence. He wasn't just angry, he was haunted. And that meant she had a chance, but chances were dangerous. The door creaked open, and Adrian himself stepped in. Alone this time. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes lingered on her in a way that made her sit up straight. You think I'm cruel, he said. It wasn't a question. She swallowed. I think you've been hurt more deeply than you admit. He tilted his head, studying her as though she were a puzzle. Do you know what people fear the most about me? It's not my money. It's not my empire. It's that I never forgive. Once someone betrays me, they're erased. He took a slow step closer. And yet here you are, not erased, not forgotten. Why do you think that is? Her heart hammered. She dared to answer. Because some part of you still remembers what it felt like. To be loved without condition. The silence that followed was suffocating. Adrian's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. She wondered if she'd gone too far, if he'd lash out. But instead, he turned and walked toward the door. Sleep while you can, he muttered. Tomorrow, you'll face the truth. The door slammed shut again, leaving Isabella shaken but resolute. Tomorrow, something would change whether it destroyed her or set her free. The night stretched on, restless and cold. Isabella couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every word, every flicker of emotion she had seen in Adrian's eyes. There was a battle happening inside him, one she needed to survive long enough to understand. When the morning light filtered weakly through the small window, the door opened again. This time, the guards weren't alone. Adrian followed them in, holding a folder in his hands. Sit, he ordered. She obeyed, heart pounding. He tossed the folder onto the bed beside her. Papers spilled out, contracts, reports, old letters she had written him, even photographs of moments she thought were lost. Do you see this? He asked coldly. This is your history with me. Every word, every promise, every betrayal. I've kept it all. She picked up one of the letters, her own handwriting staring back at her. Memories surged like a flood night spent dreaming, mornings spent laughing, the fragile hope they once shared. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Because, Adrian said, his voice sharp as a blade, you will explain every lie, every silence. And only then will I decide if you walk out of here alive. Her hands shook, but she lifted her chin. If this was the trial he demanded, she would face it. Because beneath the fury and control, she sensed something vital. Adrian wasn't just punishing her. He was searching for an answer he hadn't found anywhere else. And she might be the only one who could give it to him. At that moment, Isabella understood the true stakes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about redemption, about unearthing the truth buried under years of pain and ambition. And tomorrow's confrontation would decide not only her fate, but Adrian's as well. The next morning, as dawn crept over the skyline, Mary stood by the wide glass window of her penthouse, watching the light struggle to break through the heavy clouds. She held a cup of coffee, her hands trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of choices that were now hers alone to make. The city below buzzed with life, unaware of the silent wars waged in boardrooms, in private chambers, in the hearts of people who carried both privilege and guilt. Jonathan approached quietly, his steps softer than usual, his presence less commanding than before. You haven't slept, he said, not as a judgment, but as an observation. Mary turned her head, her expression unreadable. Sleep feels like a luxury I can't afford anymore. He came to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the city. What will you do, Mary? The question lingered between them, heavier than the silence that followed. She sipped her coffee, her eyes never leaving the horizon. I'll do what they never expected. I'll rise. Not just for myself, but for every voice they silenced, every life they bought, every soul they crushed beneath the weight of their empire. Jonathan studied her profile, the steel in her eyes, the quiet fire in her tone. He realized then that the Mary before him was no longer the woman they had tried to humiliate, no longer the pawn in a game of arrogance and control. She was becoming something greater, something unstoppable. Then you'll need allies, he said. And enemies will multiply the moment you show them you're not broken. I know, she replied. Her voice didn't waver. But I've spent too long hiding behind fear. It's time they see me for who I truly am. Jonathan placed a hand on her shoulder. a gesture of respect more than comfort. Then you won't stand alone. Mary gave a faint smile. For the first time in months, it wasn't bitter or forced. It was the smile of someone who had finally accepted the storm within her and chosen to wield it as a weapon. The city stretched before them like a battlefield waiting to be claimed. Somewhere out there, the men who had underestimated her were sharpening their knives, ready to strike again. But Mary was no longer prey. She was the shadow they would never outrun, the reckoning they could not silence. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, Mary whispered, not to Jonathan, not to the city, but to herself, as a vow carved into the marrow of her being. They thought they buried me in darkness, but I was only taking root. The world had yet to learn what Mary was capable of. But it would, soon.